Well, this is Jack Donovan, author of The Way of Men, and you're listening to Start the World. My guest today is AJA Cortes, formerly known as Chad Jesus. And AJ, thanks for coming on the show.
How's it going, Jack?
All right, so last year, a lot of people had a bad year, and you had a pretty awesome year. Like I remember hearing about everything, and you started out, you were in Egypt when the world started to shut down.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that, because it's a cool story.
So I'll start at the beginning. So 2019, which was now 2 years ago. It was 2019. I had gone to Romania. I spent time with the Tate brothers. I was there for a few weeks, over a month actually. And going to 2020, I had a sense coming back to the United States that the social political situation was getting hot. I didn't want to really be around. I didn't want to be in the U.S., in 2020. So I got back and I told my girlfriend, like, guess what? I'm moving overseas. We're going to travel. We can be together. We cannot be together. You come with me or not come with me. If you want to come with me, great. I want you to have you with me. If not, no, I'm going regardless. So she was very down for the idea. And originally we had this idea of sort of like a world tour set up. We were going to go to a lot of countries, just have this very fun time. And the first country on that list was Egypt. I'd always want to see Egypt, historical place. There's a lot of old stuff there, obviously. Pyramids, Valley of Kings. So we got to Egypt in February, and the virus, the Wuhan Chinese, can't speak its name virus. That was already in the news. That was circulating. Is this going to spread? Is this going to become this global issue? And I feared, maybe it spreads, but I'm not thinking there's going to be a pandemic and what would happen. As it went down, watching the course of events unfold in Egypt, I saw, okay, it's in multiple countries. Okay, it's growing here. There's cases here. There's cases here. And I start getting the sense like, maybe we need to leave. I don't want to get locked down in Egypt if there's going to be some sort of lockdown situation. And ironically enough, the day we were due to fly back to the United States, in fact, I said, I have some friends that work in the State Department. They told me, you know what, there's a lockdown coming. You should consider getting out of the country if you don't want to be there for a while. This was in March now. I was like, all right, so I booked a flight. We were going to go from Egypt to Turkey, back to the US, to Miami actually. And then at the airport that morning, all flights in Egypt got canceled. All flights out of Europe were grounded. And this was like the weekday of the shutdown. I want to say it was March 17th, something like that, when everything just began to close. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't get back to the United States, which ended up being this blessing in disguise. I was like, all right, where can we go? The only countries that were open were really Southeast Asia. Turkey had shut down all of its airports. So, that whole region of flights in the world was closed out. We couldn't do it. And Thailand had been one of the countries on the list since I'd always wanted to go to Thailand to do Muay Thai. So I thought we'd end up there later. I'd go to Thailand later. But we could still get into Thailand. So we were at the airport for, it was something like 15 hours. We managed to get a flight. The craziness of it at the time, it's funny to look back on now, but literally the airport employees, every airline, they were printing out papers, looking at them just by the minute, like, okay, which countries are closed? They thought we were going to Malaysia first. Wait, Malaysia just shut down. You can't go there. I was like, no, we're going to Thailand. Thailand kept its borders open for another 5 days. So we got into Thailand, and then the entire country shut down within 3 days of getting there. But we were in Thailand. So I was like, you know what? This is a pretty good place to be, despite having lockdowns. Thailand was very calm. They've dealt with SARS before. Very low-key energy. Nobody was overreacting. There was no media frenzy panic. There was no death meter, counting down each day. Oh, this many people died. This very calm response. And then also Thailand was a sunny country. Thailand's not overweight. the spread with there was extremely low. While I was there was less than 4,000 cases the whole time. There's only like 60 deaths. It wasn't a thing there really.
Right.
So while I was there, I was like, this is actually pretty cool. It's a tropical place. Food's amazing. People are wonderful. I love the Thai people. I'm like, I can do Muay Thai now. So I got in touch through, I'll give her sort of a shout out of sorts. There's an American fighter that lives in Thailand. Her name is Sylvie Douglas Von Tooten, something like that. I'm totally butchering her last name. She goes by Sylvie. So Sylvie, she's American. She's a woman, obviously. She's had over 250 professional fights in Muay Thai.
Wow. More
than any American. She has a website, 8limbs.com, I believe is the website. Anyone that's listening to this that's like serious about Muay Thai, fight sports, like really wants to be a fighter, go to her website. She's got tutorials. She's done training sessions with literally every Thai master of the last 30 years. Incredible resource for fighting. So through her website, I became aware of this fighter from the golden age of Muay Thai. His name was Sagat Pachindi. So he was part of the inspiration for the character in Street Fighter, Sagat.
Nice.
And he was very renowned for being this fantastic, phenomenal teacher, like the best one-on-one training you can get in the country. Like if you're going to be a Muay Thai fighter, go train with Sagat. If you're really going to do it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to train with Sagat. So I got his number from her, and then I trained with Sagat every day for basically 6 months. From let's see, when this, what was like May, June, July, August, May, June, July, August, September, October, and then in November. So I trained with Sagat every day for 6 months. We met up every day, and he taught me the fundamentals and basics and essentials of Muay Thai. And then at the end of 6 months, I decided, you know what, I feel like I'm ready to go, train with other people. Sort of put myself more in like the traditional Thai gym atmosphere where you train twice a day. It's 2 or 3 hour training sessions. There's clinching, there's sparring. So then I did that in November and December. And then in December is when I finally decided to come back because, with the election sort of fiasco, whatever you want to call it, all that craziness, I realized, like, okay, the U.S. don't think Trump's going to win. There's going to be a whole bunch of socio-political changes. California, I was still keeping track of. I could see taxes were supposed to go up. There's going to be new wealth taxes. There's urban decay, happening at an accelerated rate. And I wanted to change my tax residence, to a different state that was zero income tax. And, because I was going to be living overseas, that's the plan long term. You want to reduce your tax bill. So for any of the guys listening to this where you think, I want to leave the U.S., I want to be an expat. You can obviously book a flight and go to a country, but securing a visa, getting a long-term residence, paying taxes, you still have to pay taxes. You can't avoid that. The IRS is international. So if you're going to do that and you're serious about it, like it behooves you to educate yourself on the subject. For myself, I realized, okay, I don't want to have my tax residence in California. I don't want to be connected to California. I want to go to a zero income tax state. I want to have a home base in the United States while having multiple residences overseas. What would be the best state to do that in? Florida, zero income tax, very, very business friendly, tropical kind of state, a lot of excellent fighting gyms in Florida. So I decided to make Florida the place. But that was my 2020. It was just training Muay Thai every day. Business wise, I won't lie, I made a fuckload of money last year. Like that was 2020 was the best thing that ever happened to my business. Literally doubled my income because everybody was training at home. Everybody wanted home training workouts. Everybody wanted to know how to adapt their training to, hey, what if I only have dumbbells or kettlebells or all I have is a cable setup or calisthenics. So, that was kind of surprising to me because I had a few weeks during lockdown where I'm like, oh shit, like, most of my programs are designed for a gym, not, right. Home training, but the home training products, they took off. So, this sounds braggadocio, but like, it was a fantastic year. I had the best year professionally, personally, spiritually, on every front. It was the best year of my life.
Awesome. Yeah. Especially not being here. I think that's probably helped a lot. Yeah. Like, not being here and having to deal with like the American mess, I think would probably be helpful because it was a lot more weird, I think probably. Like, is it going to happen today? Is it civil war today? That's kind of just been an ongoing question for the past like year. So it's just been, it's definitely been a different environment. Obviously I was pissed off enough that I like jumped ship and sold my house and moved from one state to the other. But so yeah, it sounds like you were in a great spot. And yeah, a lot of people in the fitness industry either got completely destroyed or had a great year. I know my friends work for a manufacturing company that does exercise equipment, and their company like quadrupled in size because of all the home gyms that were happening. And you couldn't buy weights, like for the longest time. I paid way too much money for some weight plates, and after a while. So
everything was out of stock. Yeah, I mean, I had friends that were coming the same thing. People that trained in person and worked at like commercial gyms got wrecked. Yeah, but yeah, I know Rogue, Elite FTS, Titan, every fitness manufacturer was sold out of.
Oh yeah, I was like checking them every day.
Dumbbell, plate, barbell, rack setup,
Yeah.
So I mean, it was good on that front, but yeah, it was definitely a year of adaptation. I realized where, I wasn't in the U.S., so of course, Thailand was very calm. As I said, the one thing that was a big hit for them was there was no tourist. So obviously, in Thailand is literally like 20% of their GDP is tourism. So that was a huge drag in their economy. But because they're an ancient country, people can always go back to literally their village where their parents or grandparents still farm rice, and they have a cow and they have a garden. So they have sort of that underlying social structure in place to weather almost that situation.
Right.
Not that it's good that they're in a recession, but they have that extended family structure, that subsistence living structure. Whereas in the U.S., obviously, like I wasn't here. I'm only looking at news stories, but seeing like the economic devastation, people losing their jobs, and businesses getting shut down, gyms getting closed, people getting dragged out of their homes, or by force. Like watching this stuff get enforced. Yeah, that was very sobering. Where not to be black-pilled in the United States, but I just knew from that point on, I'm like, okay, like the social situation in this country it's changing for the worse. It's not going to magically reverse itself overnight.
Right.
So this requires a level of like tactical, strategic preparation. Like, all right, like how are you going to thrive in this situation? Like, how do you start? What adjustments you need to start making?
Yeah. I mean, and this year will be interesting as well, because who depends, how hard they go and in which directions. Because obviously there's going to be some big changes for a lot of people. It's like I obviously make my living from running my mouth. So that's not really same. So that's not really the best situation to be in, but it's been pretty good so far. Obviously, a lot of guys were interested in concepts like maybe you should have a tribe, and my books did fine this past year.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
I mean, and it's the other thing is it was kind of funny that. On the cover of The Way of Men, they're all wearing masks, which is, I wrote it in 2012 and did the art in 2012, but now it's just funny. I'm like, I feel like a prophet. Like, wow. It's
foreshadowing.
It looks like Mad Max with masks. And I'm like, well, maybe that's 2021. I don't know. But so what are some of the, I mean, as far as Egypt goes, before all the bullshit went down, I mean, what did you see there that was interesting?
Egypt, so I'll choose my words carefully. I don't want to ever be overly denigrating. Egypt, the one thing I'll say, Egypt is the dirtiest country I've ever been in.
Wow.
By far. It is just a level of general dust and garbage and filth that is, like I was not prepared for. And I've traveled a lot of places. That is a very dirty country. So that's one negative, I'll say. Anyone that goes there, don't expect it to be clean. It's not.
Right.
Yeah. That said, I mean, I know Egyptians are not Arab. I'm not going to call them Arab, but the general, let's just say Muslim world, one of the great things about them, I'll say, very hospitable people. Yeah, that's one thing that I love about Muslim countries. They're always very hospitable. It's a part of Islam where you treat guests with extreme respect. If I bring you to my home, so if you're now under my roof. So the customer service there is quite excellent. I always appreciate that. For anyone that's never traveled outside the U.S., you don't realize how shitty U.S. customer service is. Just general U.S. service towards anything until you go somewhere else. You're not getting sassed by teenagers at Starbucks. You're not getting attitude from somebody. There's not the generic overweight manager that's giving you shit, for wanting to return something. You go outside in the broader world, you get treated very, very well. Maybe not everywhere, but a lot of countries, they have that kind of service. And Egypt certainly did. And the one big thing about Egypt, of course, is the historical stuff. I went to the pyramids while I was there.
Nice.
The pyramids are 6,000-7,000 years old.
Yeah.
And they're big. It's crazy because in Cairo, you can see them while you're in the city. They're sort of they're on the horizon. And you can go to them. It's like a 20-30 minute drive to get to them. They're across the Nile River, and they're enormous. They're at just staggering in scale, and you realize shit, someone, people, slaves, whatever, Jewish slaves, whatever hell, black slaves, who cares, right?
Right.
They built this, men with fucking logs and stone and just basic, Bronze Age tools. They fucking built this. Yeah. How long did that take? And you can actually go inside them a little bit. There's certain tombs you can actually go into, and there's one tomb. I want to say it's called the Sarcophagus of the Queen. It's right next to the big pyramid, but it's supposed to be older than the pyramid itself. And you're in this chamber, you're this is someone's body was in this for 7,000 years. Yeah. So the Sphinx, what I was saying about the Sphinx is actually not that big.
Right.
So you expect it to be this I don't know. In my head, I had this idea that it must be this 8-story, statue construction.
Yeah.
It's maybe about 2.5, 3 stories.
Oh wow.
It's comparatively diminutive, next to the pyramids. Okay. Yeah, but again, as I was saying, you can just kind of walk up to it, walk around it. But it's in a bit of a ravine, in regards to the larger pyramids. Right. It's right there, and it's right there. And and the one place I didn't go to that I regret not going to, it's because the country is closing down. But Valley of Kings,
right?
Same thing. If you want to go to Valley of Kings, though, it's a day's ride from Cairo. Egypt's not that big. Wow. A very huge population, but it's literally just Cairo. Everywhere else, Cairo is the mega city. You have Alexandria, you have a few other smaller cities, but you have Cairo everywhere else.
Right.
But all of their historical stuff is just entirely out in the open. There's no real security on anything. Yeah, which again, when you're in the U.S., that would probably have a gazillion guards around it, and you'd have to walk through a metal detector, all this stuff. The security there is almost nothing. The Egyptian Museum of Antiquities. So they've got all the sarcophagus in there. They got the statues, got all this stuff from the tombs. Most of it you can actually literally touch. This was funny stuff in Egypt, but there's certain things that can be incredibly disorganized. This museum was the most disorganized, messy museum I've ever been in. Wow. There's no structure to the museum at all. It doesn't start in a time period. There's no route you take to go through it and okay, here's the old kingdom, here's the middle kingdom, here's new kingdom. They just shoved everything in a building wherever they could fit stuff. Yeah, I swear to God.
Wow.
So you'll walk in, and immediately in front of you is sarcophagus, tomb. Nothing's behind glass. There's no climate control. So you could literally, they don't let you do this, but if you want to go get inside, a chamber, or someone's coffin, you could totally do that. No one's probably going to stop you.
Wow.
Yeah. So that it's just funny. It was funny because I was walking next to stuff. I'm oh wow, this is most stuff's in Arabic. I'm wow, this statue's from 5,000 years ago. Holy shit, this was a real guy. It's you could jump up on it. People would do that sometimes. Some of the Europeans, they kind of look around there's no real guards. Jump on the statue, hug it, just take a bunch of pictures, jump off of it, So that was the Museum of Antiquities. And that's how they run it.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't get it. Part of me is cognitive dissonance, right? I've been going to so many museums, and it's what the fuck is this? Is a museum? This is somebody's basement. Yeah, but that's how they operate. So cool.
Wow. Yeah. That's
anyone that ever goes, you're going to be surprised as an American how loose it is.
Wow. Cool. So did you go to any places like that in Thailand?
I went through a few temples. So Thailand, they must have museums, right? But the old stuff in Thailand, the cool stuff is always the Buddhist temples.
Yeah.
So Thailand, a little bit about the history of Thailand. So Thailand used to be part of the Kingdom of Burma. They kind of went back and forth. It was Thailand, it was Burma, it was Thailand, it was Burma. Burma invaded Thailand like in the 1700s. I want to say like the 1760s, and they destroyed a lot of stuff. They had to be rebuilt. And the Thais to this day don't really like the Burmese. Like, you know, they're never, you don't say this openly, but the Burmese are like, yeah, how'd you say? Where it's like, maybe in the U.S., like in the 1960s, is like, oh, Mexicans are like the poor, dumber brown people that are labor force.
Right.
And Thailand, it's like, you know, in whereas for Mexicans, like the stupid people are like Guatemalans and Dominicans. I'm just being super racial with humor right now, but this is true, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, if you go to the rest of the world,
go to the rest of the world.
Other places have prejudices that we don't even know about.
Yeah. Everywhere in the world has prejudices. Everyone is racist everywhere towards someone. Yeah. So the Thais don't really like the Burmese for that reason. Like this has been like an axe they've been grinding for 300 years. Right. But they had to rebuild a lot of the stuff, and they rebuilt it really nice. So like all of the Buddhist temples, that's all beautiful. A lot of it's been built by like sort of the king's family, or, you know, they've had a ruling king for like 10 generations or so, going back to like King Rama the First. So that's all the historical stuff to see. And they have some very cool stuff. You know, Buddhism, because it has depictions of hell, so you can go to certain temples and like you can walk through like this artistic depiction of purgatory. And there's skeleton, like there's one temple, I want to say in the north, it's like that. It's a white temple. I couldn't pronounce the name at all, save my life. But it shows like literally Buddhist hell. So you can walk through it, and it shows skeletons, it shows demons, it shows bodies being torn apart. This is all carved artwork. Awesome. You know, it shows people, you know, being crushed under stones, like all this really sick graphic stuff. Super cool. You're like, you walk through, like this is like the Garden of Hell. You know, like, and here's the Garden of Purgatory, and here's the Garden of Paradise, you know, and here's like the ascendance of the next life cycle. You know, it's all extremely visual. So I went to a lot of places like that, which was very awesome. And I did a few ceremonies as well with Sagat, where they have a lot of holidays. So there's certain days. Today's Family Day, today's Teacher Day, today's Father's Day, Mother's Day, today's some sort of auspicious day, as they say. So let's go to the temple. You know, we'll go there for the ceremony. We give gifts to the monks. You know, we get the blessing. You know, they're very Buddhists. You know, they're Theravada Buddhists. So all Thais like very much believe in like in luck and fortune. Mm-hmm. So anything that you can do to like increase your inclination of getting lucky, of having blessings, or, you know, so overall like universal benevolence, you know, they take that very, very seriously. You know, so a lot of the ceremonies kind of orient around that. Like they orient themselves towards that. And then, you know, even certain monks, like we went and saw one monk that was a former Muay Thai fighter that decided to become a monk. You know, and he gave us like a blessing for like great power and great strength, and you'll be invincible in your fight, you know, next time you fight, these kinds of things. The monk culture there is interesting because any man can become a monk at any time. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like expected that at some point in time, every Thai man will serve as a monk for at least 6 months. Usually when your father dies, that's like sort of the cultural ritual. So when your father dies, like this is a common thing there. Like whenever your father dies, as part of the mourning, you shave your head, you go to the temple, like you enter into the monkhood, and it usually lasts. Yeah, that's just it's almost, I'm gonna say everyone does that, but the majority of the population does that. Like when your father dies, you become a monk, or like it could be like another close relative, but the father especially, it's patriarchal society like everywhere in the world. So it's usually like 6 months. Even celebrities will do it. You know, like they're, you know, they have celebrities like everywhere else. You know, there was a celebrity. Yeah, he was like a singer actor. Like when his father died, he shaved his head and did monkhood for 2 months. And then while you're a monk, you're doing all the duties that, you know, a monk would do. So you meditate every day, you pray in silence, you sit in silence, you sweep the grounds, you know, you administer certain alms, and, you know, administer certain basic rituals. And then most men, after a period of time, they decide to, you know, they leave the monkhood. Like, okay, I did my mourning, I did sort of like my service, and now I'm gonna enter back into real life. Some guys will, you know, some monks will keep doing it, and there's levels to the monkhood, sure, in that regard. So they'll do it maybe like 1 to 2, you know, 3 years, and then for some men, it is somewhat of almost like a career. Right. You know, because the monk, you know, the temples are free to live in if you're a monk, and then people, the general population around you, they're always giving you money and giving you gifts. So yeah, you obviously have sustenance that way. Yeah. But yeah, I found that was very fascinating to me. You know, like that's their mode of sort of grievance.
Well, it's interesting. It's like I think there's a saying that you don't really become a man until your father dies.
Yes.
And that's an interesting because it sounds very initiatory, almost like
Mhm.
you go through this process. You basically shave your head, become another person, and then you know go take on a new role in life after you're done with that. It seems very it fits a lot of patterns, really. That's
Oh,
very interesting.
definitely.
I've never heard about that, but that's it's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's everyone's allowed to do it. And then yeah, like, what things were interesting to me about it, like, is depending upon what your past life was.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're a monk, like you're considered to be auspicious for certain powers, so to speak. So Thais take this very seriously. Like whatever the monk is that you're seeing that you're going to for advice, um, like I'll give, let's say a guy was a doctor and then he like entered into the monkhood. Like, okay, so this as a monk now, like you must have healing powers because you were a doctor. So
Okay.
people are probably going to come to you wanting some sort of physical healing. The same thing with like the monk that was the former Muay Thai fighter. He was
Yeah.
like supposed to be this very good fighter, this champion fighter. He's a monk now. Like, oh, so he must have powers for fighters.
Okay.
So if you go to him and like you tell him that I have a fight coming up, or I need, I need strength, I need speed, I need something, like, okay, he's going to give you certain blessings that will give you that kind of power.
Right.
And I obviously, like, I don't speak Thai, so a lot of this I kind of learned from Sagat, who didn't necessarily speak the best English either, but like what he really conveyed to me, a lot of the culture, and you see this as you really observe it, is that, like, Thais very much have this transcendental metaphysical world that they live in. Versus like we don't have this in the United States. This is
Right.
that'd be like groovy girl, crystal chakra shit. But for Thais, where like their culture is truly alive and living, and like it's in everything that they do, like powers exist, like gods exist, like God exists. So like, certain actions you take and rituals you do, like, okay, like you want to make more money. Oh, you want to like knock the guy out in your next fight. Like, oh, you're feeling weak. They're very almost like Greecian in the way they regard sort of like the soul of the body. So like this is like this is like a historical thing going back to ancient Egypt. Like, is the soul like the heart or the brain?
Mm-hmm.
So like for the Egyptians, for the Greeks, it was considered that your sort of your inner world, your inner universe, it was in the heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now like in like the modern Western world, it's like, okay, we have the mind, the world of the mind, like it's in here, we're in our heads. For Thais, it's about heart.
Okay.
So they don't talk about mind. Like they'll tell you, like, when you're training to fight, like you must have no mind. You can't think. You're thinking too much.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to be good at this and you're going to excel at Muay Thai, Muay Thai really sort of captures everything about the culture. You have to have heart. Like, do you have strong heart? Do you have weak heart? Is your heart feeling weak? So like when fighters, let's say they get discouraged, like they're questioning their fight career, they don't talk about cognitively, like, oh, like I'm thinking about it and I'm having doubts and insecurities. Like they emphasize, like, my heart feels weak. Like I don't know if I have like the power in me for this anymore. So I thought that was super cool, right?
Yeah.
It's just different. Like, that's the cultural stuff where you go somewhere else, like, wow, this is like how they view the universe and their reality is on very different terms.
Yeah. Well, Western men tend to get, especially depending on how you were raised, really athletic men that I've known who are just naturally athletic.
Mm-hmm.
Just from learning martial arts myself, it's dudes who are naturally athletic copy your movements, and dudes who are naturally kind of bookish a lot of times will think about what you said. And then
Yes.
and they'll verbally walk through all the steps of what you just told them to do, which
Mm-hmm.
is really slow. It's not really how you learn that stuff. It's like you actually, like, over time, you just like when I started jiu-jitsu, I just stopped from learning boxing and doing that, like, and now you turn your hip this way, like that. A lot of guys will do that. They'll actually
Mm-hmm.
walk themselves through it. And when I started learning jiu-jitsu, I was more like, I'm just not even going to learn the names of moves. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to learn the names of things. I'm not going to care for years. Eventually I have to learn some stuff like that. But right now I'm just going to go copy what other people are doing and feel my way through it, mm-hmm. which I think is a lot more of a natural way than trying to, like, be super, brainy about it. So, the Western men do tend to get up in their own heads a little bit,
Yeah.
So the whole idea of them being in the heart, I think, is actually very interesting.
Yeah, well, the way Muay Thai is taught, it's all, I don't want to say it's unintelligent, since Muay Thai is, like, there's a lot of striking elements in Muay Thai. You have hands, you have elbows, you have knees. It's a lot to think about. And If you know if you're untrained or even this, maybe only trained a little bit, and you get put in with a trained guy, you just get your life taken from you. It's it can be horrifying. It's like, holy shit, I'm helpless. Like I could be killed by him if you want to.
Yeah.
But the way they teach, it's all about heart. So like they don't really care if a guy loses, because Muay Thai fighters in Thailand, they fight every month from the time they start training to whenever they retire. So there is no such thing as having an amateur career. Okay. As soon as you start training, you could literally train. If you wanted to do this, this wasn't possible while I was there because all the fights were basically shut down. And there's also no foreigners there. And there was no one my size, unfortunately.
Yeah. Right.
There's not too many 6 foot plus, 200 plus guys in Thailand training Muay Thai. It's a smaller man's sport, like a lot of fight sports are. Sure. But the way Muay Thai works is once you can basically train for a month, you're considered ready to fight. It's like, all right, you actually showed up and trained hard for a month. Okay, like you want to fight? Yeah. Okay, we're gonna book you a fight. Cool. Like let's go fight. And the matchmaking there is very good. So they'll go and find another guy that's only been training 1 or 2 months, but you're ready to fight. Like if you have heart, like if you think you want to do this, like you're ready to fight. So kids like Sagat, he told me when he was a kid, he was like 10 years old, and his brothers were, like he comes from a fighting family. He has a lot of like older relatives that were fighters, which I could talk about. But he comes from a fighting family. He was like 10 years old. Brothers were at the gym. They brought him. He went there for a month. He had pretty good power. As he found out, like, power is, remember, you have it or you don't. But see, he found out he hit pretty hard for a kid. After a month, they're like, oh, you want to fight? He was like 9, 10. They're like, oh, he's like, okay. He had 3 fights in 1 weekend. Amazing. He lost the first. Yeah, he lost the first fight, then won the second fight and knocked the kid out in the third fight. And he won like 20 baht, which was enough for like 2 bowls of noodles. Okay, back in like 1968 or some shit like that. Right. And then his career started, and he had 311 professional fights.
Wow. And
he had 151 knockouts. And the way fighting works there is you fight every single month, usually multiple times a month. And maybe as you get more to champion level, you might fight less, but it's just routine. Okay, you have a fight coming up this week, and then 3 weeks later, and then 4 weeks later, and then 3 weeks later, and then 4 weeks later, and then 3 weeks later. So you have to be fit all the time.
Right.
And because they don't do hard sparring there the way guys do in the U.S. Like the thing in the United States, I was talking about this. I went and boxed this morning. I had my sparring I do now. But we were talking about it, and we're like, in the United States, because there's no such thing as being like a pro fighter that way, where you fight every week, every week, every month. Yeah, MMA fighters, if they have more than 10 fights, it's like, oh, I've had 10 fights. That's like, oh, that's pretty good. That's a lot of fights. Yeah, damn, you got 20 fights. So in the in the United States, in the gym, guys have gym wars. They basically have fights, but it's at the gym. Like sparring means we're going to have an actual fight. I'm going to beat your ass. You're going to beat my ass. This is a very routine thing. The Thais, they don't do it that way because they actually have pro fights all the time. So their sparring is very much more technical. It's light sparring, it's play sparring, it's getting your timing down. So they train very hard. Like this is 2 or 3 hours of training. Like a typical practice, like a serious gym, like the gym I was at, it was 3 rounds of rope skipping. Everyone skips rope. You're not getting off skipping rope. Everyone skips rope.
Right.
3 rounds of skipping, 3 rounds of shadow boxing, 5 rounds of bag work, 5 rounds of pad work, and then anywhere from 6 to 10 rounds of sparring clinching. And you do that twice a day. Okay. So on any given day, you're getting in like 10 rounds of sparring and 10 rounds of bag work and 10 rounds of pad work and 6 rounds of skipping. And also you're expected to run too. If you have a fight coming up, like you should be doing some running. And the running could be anywhere from like, let's say, usually they say like 30 minutes at least. And you're running on top of that. So you're looking at like a 5-6 hour day of training. So like you don't need to go crazy in the gym. You have a fight coming up. But that's how their careers progress. So you have your first fight there for a lot of guys when they're 10. By the time they're 15, they've had 60 fights. By the time they're 20, they've had at least 100 fights.
Wow.
And what you quickly find out, going back to the original point I was making, who has heart to do this shit?
Yeah.
If you're one of those guys where you get a little bit better, but you start getting hurt, or like, guess what? Fighting fucks you up. Okay, like you don't have the fighting heart for this. That's okay. And if you lose, it's not a big deal. They don't care. Like you could be a 12-year-old kicking your ass kick. You might lose 3 in a row, but like you fought hard every time. So who cares if you lost? But what they really look for is if you are in a fight, you're getting beat up and you get discouraged mentally. That's what they look for. You know, they see that like, oh, okay, this guy, you know, he's hurt. He doesn't want to fight. He's not willing to get knocked out. He's running away. He's dejected afterwards. He's sad. His heart's sad. Maybe this isn't for you. You know, it's like, and there's no hard feelings, obviously. It's like, if this isn't for you, it's not for you. It's okay. You know, but you know, don't make yourself do this. You, like if you don't have the heart, then you don't have the heart.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Because yeah, there's certain things that people shouldn't push themselves. It's good to push yourself. It's good to push yourself, but there's a certain thing like it's good to try a lot of new things, you know, and to see where you and push yourself past that point. Because there are a lot of things that I do now that if you would ask me at 28, if I could be even reasonable at, I would have been like, no, you know, like things that I just were never thought were part of my potential. So I always encourage people to do that. But at the same point, I do think, you know, there's a certain point, if you do enough of it, you have to know yourself a little bit to know where your aptitudes are, you know, and what you care about the most. I mean, like, you know, like I have all these guys who think I'm like some kind of operator or some bullshit. No, that's not my job. I'm a writer. You know, like I like to fight and do stuff like that. And you know, I think it's important that all men do something like that, you know, as part of their lifestyle. But, you know, I have no fantasies about that I'm fucking commando or whatever, you know, that's not my job. I'm about, if I was, I started about 20 years late. So like,
yeah. No, I've had that with fighting because guys have asked me that, are you going to fight pro? I'm like, and I 100% plan to, but I also don't have like illusions like, oh, I'm going to be the fucking world champion. Like let's be objective. When did I start fighting seriously? Like really training, I'd say like when I start training seriously at age 30.
Right.
So I reasonably, assuming I really take really good care of my body, I could say I have 10 years. I have 10 years, let's say, before I hit 40, and obviously you turn 40 and usually you're a little bit slower, right? Like the certain things are unavoidable. Yeah, maybe 42 if I want 12 years. Yeah, but I remember I was talking about that with Sagat a little bit. He's like, how old you know, how many years you are? That's what I asked. You know, how many years you are? I was like, I'm 30. He's like, old. He's like, you have heart. He's like, you know, every course of training, he's like, you have heart though. You're strong. You have power. You have the power. He's like, you can fight. You know, and he had a relative that was who was a champion fighter. This is actually like an inspiring thing for me. You know, I was there, sort of like cemented the decision to like take this really seriously. But he had an uncle from the 1960s, 70s called the Silver Ghost.
Right. And
this guy was a champion in his youth from like the age of like 10 to 20, went to prison for murder at the age of like 20, 21. Like the exact dates are not known. But basically, so he was a champion fighter. He's known for having knockout power. He killed a guy, went to prison, got out 14 years later when he was like 34, okay? And started his career again as a Muay Thai fighter. And went and became a champion again at like 37.
Savage.
So, yeah, it's like he was called the Ghost, and he was like, and Sagat showed me a picture of the guy. He's like fucking, you know, they're tatted up. He's like fucking tatted up, like, you know, this, you can tell they all got shoulders, right? Shoulders. Just had one of those looks of like that is a hard motherfucker.
Right.
So Sagat told me that story, and like you could tell he's like I was inspired by. He's like, oh, let's go visit the guy's like the statue. There's a statue of him in his hometown. You know, that was built up, put up after he died, and like I got pictures of me, you know, next to it, along with some photos of him. You know, but after hearing that, I'm like, all right, like I could have, you know, some substance to doing this seriously. But I mean, that's the goal right now with all this training I've been doing. You know, since I've been training twice a day for the last 10 months, like to fight professionally.
Nice.
You know, but then at the same time, I think about that in the back of my head. I'm like, dude, you're 30, you're gonna be 32, starting like a pro fight career.
Right.
Fucking cool. Like, cool.
Yeah, fuck it. I mean, do it while you can. I mean, it's doors close as you get older.
Yeah.
You're like, like you're 22 and you're like, you could literally do anything at that. You're 22. And then as you get older, it's like, you know, you get like, well, I can't just run off and join the military because that they won't take me. You know, like there's a whole bunch of things that just close. That you're like, well, I'm probably never going to do that. So, you know, if you're still young enough to do it and give it a shot, I mean, if you take 3 fights, that's, I mean, that's a good story. Yeah. You know, that's a good story. I do like it. Like starting something like that as you're older, I do think you have a different expectation, which is cool. I mean, I didn't start training any martial arts until I was like 38. So I didn't have any fantasies about like, you know, like that you'd have it at 22, you know, like I'm a fucking badass and I'm going to kill everybody. And you know, like
I'm going to be a fucking light heavyweight champion. I'm like,
yeah. I would just like 20, get a little better at this, you know, like I think I could do pretty well, you know, like I think I'm all right. You know, like, and then you surprise yourself a little bit, but it's, you don't go into it with the same, you know, I hate that word, but the same ego as I think you do have when you're a young kid. You're like pretty realistic about like, okay, well, there's a timeline here, you know?
Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, if I was to make that like a teachable moment for any of the guys that's going to be listening to this, like, 20 to from the age of 18 to 28, you can probably literally do, like you said, fucking anything. You do anything you want.
The world is yours.
You're young. Your body isn't screwed up. You don't have like I don't feel any different right now. I'm gonna be 32. I don't feel any different physically from 22, where I'm like, oh, I'm slower. You know, like I've lost a step. But I've had stupid injuries where it's like, oh, remember that ACL I tore? Fuck yeah, I do. You know, because my knee hurts from it. Right. You know, or like, oh, remember when I hyperextend my fucking elbow? Oh, remember that, you know, shoulder separation from fucking benching? Yeah, I remember it because my shoulder hurts from it. Like, it's not to imply that you're gonna, anyone listening, like you're gonna hit 30, then like you go downhill physically, but just stupid injuries and things like that pile up. When you're 22 to 28, you probably have, or 18 to 28, you probably haven't hurt yourself. You can do anything you want physically. If you have physical gifts, you want to explore them and apply them. Like, yeah, that's where you can put yourself in a position and say, hey, if I train for the next 5 years, I could be world champion. You know, I could go to, you know, maybe the Olympics, or I could go to the Pan America Games, or I could do this at a very high, truly elite world-class level. You get into your 30s, maybe. And then obviously when you get closer to 40 or at 40, you're going to be in the Masters division with the old guys, which is totally cool. But you're in the Masters.
I mean, if it takes that, if that's when you have to start, that's when you have to start. I mean, cool. I was actually, when I was doing traditional boxing, they were looking for, you know, like in the USA Boxing League, my assistant at that time was taking a fight, and the coach was looking for me because I was like, well, if he does it, I have to do it. I'm like the, you know, like I'm his, whatever example, you know. And so if he has to do it, I have to do it. But I'm like, and I looked at some of the USA Boxing like dudes in the Masters category, and I'm like, damn, I want to fight those guys because it wasn't good. You know, like in boxing, especially, like you either get hit in the head a lot and you're a real mean motherfucker, or you're just a dad who's doing it because his kid's doing it, whatever. And it was what I was seeing was dads. And I'm like, I'll go punch someone's dad. You know, like that sounds great. Yeah. But, you know, it'll be glorious. But no, I mean, it's good. It's good to do it regardless if you can get it up. So they couldn't even find anyone for me because it wasn't, the same size and age and all that kind of shit at that time. And yeah, I don't think I would really do that now. But yeah, it is. It's definitely interesting. And yeah, a lot of guys think what you're saying about like injuries mounting up. There's all kinds of different 35s and 45s. You know, based on how I always like to say I'm lightly used. Like I was a lightly used, like that's a good way of saying it. That's a good way of saying it. Yeah, like I was like you know, like I'm training at one of the places I train at is Jeremy Horn's gym, and he's like had like 200. He's had like 200 professional fights or something like that, like something insane. And we're about the same age. And I mean
that's funny.
What his body must feel like versus what my body feels like are totally different fucking thing. You know. You know, that's a huge difference in you know, and same as dudes who've been in the military for 8 or 10 years and had to ruck every day, like their knees are garbage, you know, like in their you know, compared to like, well, I was just drinking in San Francisco, nothing happened to me during those years, so I'm fine, you know. So I get to be lightly used, but yeah, people
I was gonna say that's a good fitness point to make. Just again, if anyone listening, rucking will destroy your knees and hips. Yeah. I have so many I've had so many clients over the years where like maybe younger than me. Guy that was like 27, but he did 4 tours in Iraq with 100 pounds of gear. He's like, yeah, man, I got no cartilage in my knees. I'm like, yeah, like if you're gonna ruck, like do it very lightly and very occasionally. Like adding weight to your body, then attempting to run with it, it's not necessary for anything. It's really not, unless you are literally a soldier. You don't need to be doing that. Just
it is for
be smart with
soldiers,
your
and they should probably make shoulders do it less, just because it's
Yeah.
so bad for you. And then like actually weird, a friend that I used to had, there's a, I don't want to talk shit about it, the group or whatever, but there's a whole company that has like competitions for rucking for like civilians, and I'm like, that is a terrible idea. Why would you do that? Like, that is not good for you. Although I was very inspired today. I was at the gym because Utah's fairly free, and I was at the gym today, and there was literally someone doing farmer carries with a full plate carrier in the gym, and I was like, fuck yeah, America. He's like he seemed like he was either like some like somewhere, came from somewhere in Asia or somewhere in like maybe Latino. It was hard to tell, that kind of cross, maybe Filipino, something like that. But the big American flag on his gear, and I was like, hell yeah. Pretty cool. And so I took a little picture of it and sent it to some of my friends, because obviously there are places in the country where if a plate carrier walked to the gym, they'd lose their minds.
Yeah, you probably get a rush to get the cops called on you. Karen women, but
I think he had the full plate in it and everything. He was doing awesome. The real deal. It was cool. I was glad to see it. Definitely. So you've been kind of on the solar thing as well, as far as I know, we talked about doing a podcast ages ago, actually, while you were in Thailand. And,
Thailand.
The connections and whatever were and the scheduling didn't work out, but what does that mean to you, and like the whole solar approach to things, and what does it mean to you, and what have you done in the past year? And I have another question, but I'll just stop there. Let's go there.
Yeah, so solar life, I mean, like this has a lot of depth to it.
Sure.
But I always start things off topical. Like on a very basic level, like when I was in Thailand, or not even before that, like when I was living in San Diego, I started getting the habit of training outside more in the sun. Mm-hmm. And the difference in training and the general satisfaction of a workout when you are inside and the sun's on you, you're bare chested, you take off your clothes, you're in shorts, whatever, versus being indoors was just, it was just dramatic. Even the gym I'm at now, it's a Metroflex Marietta. They have an outdoor training area. I only use the outdoor training area. When I was in Thailand, I started to basically only train almost outside exclusively. And this being in the sun, because we are legitimately like light powered, solar powered beings. Everything from your circadian rhythm, your expression of testosterone, serotonin, dopamine, your mitochondrial function. That's all linked to light exposure. Like you need solar radiation to function normally. Mm-hmm. We all know that intuitively. If you take anyone, you put them in a dark environment, don't let them see the sun, allow them only to see blue light, screen, typical office worker life, right? What happens? You get depressed, you get lazy, you feel sad. Like you're living like a low energy, low light life.
It's why grunge music came from Seattle. It's why there's a high suicide rate in places like that too.
So the solar life, like that's when I was in Thailand, I was living solar every day. I'd go outside in the sun, I'd get my training in. Most of the gyms in Thailand for Muay Thai, some are indoors, but a lot of them are open air gyms. Yeah. So like you're always, like even if you're not in the sun directly, you're in the air. You can walk out in the sun, you can walk back in. It was just incredible in terms of the quality of life. Like I feel like I was like living at the peak of my existence every day. Like this is just nice. This is the life to live. This is how man was meant to live. You train in the sun, you eat in the sun. You wake up in the morning, it's like you feel in your eyes, and it's just incredible. So I started, posting on like Instagram, train solar, train outside, basically. Just start with that, like train outside.
Yeah.
Then on a, sort of like a more like social, cultural, deeper level, the world is, especially the past years, has gotten so increasingly dark, cynical, black pill, all the adjectives I could use. There's so few men you encounter on a broad social level that like they're light filled, that they're bright. Yeah, in the way of it looking heroic, in the way of being an example, in the way of like where you can look at a guy's profile or picture, it's like, wow, that guy's high energy. Like, you know, he has that kind of life. Like, you don't see that. You know, it's such a rare thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of like the feedback I started to get from guys that would follow me, where it's like, wow, man, like your life, like it just looks fucking amazing. Like, holy shit, like you could tell in the pictures, like I'm super tan, I'm glowing. Like I feel like fucking $1 billion. You know, just, you can't. There's nothing that compares to that. You feel like you're immortal. Yeah, and at the same time, I was researching ancient Greek training methods. So I went on this really deep rabbit hole last year for like 2 months, where I paid for academic journals and got behind paywalls, where I wanted to find out legitimately. I'm like, how did the ancient Greeks train? Because they trained outside. Yeah, and I was like, especially with fighting, I'm 100% committed to this. I want to get better. I'm like, how did these guys train? Boxing has been around for thousands of years. How did boxers train back in 500 BC? Because I've seen statues of them, in museums. I've seen, like that artwork exists. Like they're fit. You can tell they're fighters. Like, what did they do? And as I found out, there was a huge body of research, historical records that exist on and how they actually trained. And one of the foremost things of the ancient Greek gymnasium was the fact it was an outdoor training environment. They always trained in the sun. Right. There was no indoor gym. But I looked up exercises. I looked up, the hand weights they used, and a lot of this stuff actually has descriptions. Like there's actual lists of here's the basic preparatory exercises for drone preparation. Here's what boxers should do. Here's what runners should do. Here's how to get the legs stronger. And it changed my training style as well. I lift weights kind of now, right. But for ancient Greek boxers, I'll just go down this rabbit hole. This is super fucking cool. So ancient Greek boxers, the heaviest weights they had to use were about 10 kilos, roughly 20, 25 pounds.
Okay.
So the foremost modality of athletic preparation was wrestling. So no matter what kind of athlete you were, you would wrestle as basically like a way to get your body physically fit. Mm-hmm. So like wrestling was sort of like their strength training in a way. You're great. And anyone that knows you do jits. Like when you're clenching, grappling, that's going to build some muscle. It's not going to get you bulked up, but moving a body around, it builds this level of functional strength that you really can't compare to anything.
Yeah.
So wrestling was the base. And then with wrestling, you also you had running, you had sprints. They did a lot of fucking hill sprinting. I found that out in the research. They mentioned this very specifically, where it's okay, these types of runners, if you need to build up this kind of endurance, you want bigger legs, run hills like that. Just taking bigger steps, you're on incline. But their upper body training, that was most fascinating to me. They did dips. They did probably something that approximated like a pull up with ropes or body weight rows, but they didn't do any kind of chest pressing. They didn't have any kind of heavy pressing that way. Everything was done with these light hand weights called halteres, and they only weighed, like I said, about 20 pounds maximum. And they did shitloads and shitloads and shitloads and shitloads of front raises, lateral raises, bent over raises, overhead raises, walking raises, isometric holds, for time. And this is described in detail. It's not, this is not supposition. It's you do these exercises, you do this kind of raise, this kind of raise. They did basically almost like an Arnold curl, bicep to overhead press. That's how they work their upper body. Nice. And that was just fascinating to me, because I started doing that more and more. That's a lot of what my training is now. When I do train upper body, I do chin-ups, and I just do shitloads of basically arm shoulder raises. The transfer over to boxing to striking, it's a direct transfer.
No, it makes perfect sense.
It legitimately is.
The hardest thing about fucking boxing is keeping your hands up.
Keeping your hands up.
Yeah. I mean, it's especially if you have big arms. It's okay.
Everyone learns that the first day. You're like, holy shit.
Yeah. And so if you're doing this all the time, I can't imagine that wouldn't help. If you're doing raises and shit like that, I can't imagine.
Yeah, so tons of delt raises basically.
Nice.
So that was super, super cool. But I started doing that outside. So 30 minutes of the workout, it's all right, you're just doing gazillion lateral raises, iso raises, front hold, overhead hold, and I do that now. I'll do that for 30 minutes. And you know what? I go to box, and for being relatively still a beginner, I actually I have the upper body endurance. And I'm not a small guy. I'm fuck, this works. This totally works.
Yeah. Nice.
So that was part of the solar life. For anyone that's interested in that, I put all of it, since I wrote probably a 30-part article series on that whole subject of ancient style training. ancient Greek training. I put it into a document called Ancient Athletics. It's on my website if any guy wants to purchase it, since I thought it was super cool and people enjoyed reading about it. Yeah, I enjoyed researching it.
Yeah, no, it's like, amazing. That's one of the coolest things about the Greeks is that we actually have the information.
Oh yeah, and
there's everything they did, we know. Like, rather than like a lot of the other ancient cultures, you're like, so there's this grave, and so we think maybe they did this thing, you know. But the Greeks, they wrote it down. We know what they did, which is awesome. But yeah, I'll definitely put a link to that in the description. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll give it to you. I got asked that question, like, hey man, could you research the Vikings, or could you research like other warrior groups? I'm like, I'm sure the Vikings did cool shit, right? I'm sure everyone did cool shit that's a warrior.
Yeah.
The actual historical records, you got ancient Greece, which is incredible, and then you got graves and artifacts, and there's no written anything. So you're just assuming that the guy that had the big axe, like, I bet he threw stones or some shit. I'm like, maybe he did. We have no idea.
Yeah. It's funny to read some of those guys, like some of the academic things and whatever. You know, you almost have to take it with a little bit with a grain of salt, like, because they're extrapolating real hard from like, well, no one would simply carry this for any reason, but other than it's just things that they just don't know. They're making up explanations. And a lot of times these are people who actually haven't fought or haven't done, like all these other things. So they may not even be looking at it the right way. And
that was what was interesting researching.
Yeah.
Not to cut you off, but when I was researching even ancient Greek stuff, I could tell a lot of the academic researchers that were uncovering like even the hand weights they used, or they actually have records of the exercises. Like the physician Galen, he's like the second most famous guy after Hippocrates. Like he actually, he wrote down a lot on exercise training. Like there's books called like Gymnastica where it describes training, but you could tell the people translating it because they literally just didn't lift. They weren't sure what exactly was being described. So like, I remember like one of the movements that gets described. It's basically like an alternating deadlift. Like you deadlift to one side, up to the other side. They didn't know what it was. So like, there's this exercise, and it's like, it sounds like they put their feet this way, and then like they turn their body one way, turn the body the other way.
Right.
Yeah, like you could tell the descriptions. Like I don't know what the fuck this is. Or even like the lateral raises, or like, oh, it's thought like, oh, this. They say they put their arms out to the side. I'm like, anyone that's a bro knows that doing this is a lateral raise.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you're a fucking skinny fat researcher academic, like you don't know what that is. It's like, oh, it's like you did an arm raise. It says that like they moved their arms back and forth. Okay, they did like a front raise, this side raise. But we're bros, right?
Yeah,
that makes sense to us.
Clearly,
you never lifted weights. You don't know what that is.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was funny. That was a funny experience in the process of researching all that stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, in that world, unfortunately. I mean, and there's, obviously super smart guys who are academics and bring a lot to the table, but there's definitely a lot of I didn't like, if you had just left the library, you might know, you might understand certain things better. There's a good balance to be had with some of those people, but anyway. So anything else you want to add as far as the solar ideals, or the direction that you've gone? That's what I wanted to get to. What kind of, it seems like there's kind of been a community that's like come up around, like there's a whole bunch of dudes doing solar stuff now. And some of them I'm like, I wish you would not use that. And then other ones are like, oh, you're right on. Good. Yeah. And that's always the case with anything that you create. You can't really see how it's going to go in different directions. And everyone was kind of doing this at the same time, but so what have you had any experiences with that? I mean, there's a lot of guys who are doing that kind of stuff right now. We're talking about solar things and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it now almost become a meme, but the way I conceptualize it is like any activities you do as a man, especially like fighting, has this way of both like burning off your ego, and building you up, and you make you more confident. Like what's I think fundamentally like it increases your energy. Yeah. So the way I model training solar for like the guys like in my inner circle group, like everything that you do, you want that to amplify and increase your energy. Like if you want to live solar, like you want to be a light for people, both for yourself when you look in the mirror and everyone else. Like what can you do that makes you that person? So this gives you a filtering mechanism for, I'm not going to waste my time on bullshit arguments, low energy activities. I'm going to do things that really amplify my energy. So obviously, lifting's part of that. Combat sports are a huge part of that. Where you live is a huge aspect of that.
Oh yeah.
I got much more pushy the past year, telling people like, you know, if you're living in a blue state that you feel the quality of life's going down, or it's, you know, turned fascist, you know, the governor's, you know, going ballistic, move. Like, if you want to live this high energy life, you want to be that kind of man where like you'd envy someone else looking at them. I want to be that guy. Holy shit. Like, what a cool life. Go live in a place that gives you that kind of freedom.
Yeah.
Go do that. Yeah. Otherwise, this whole conversation, right? Like, you're telling them this, it's a moot point. Yeah, if you're telling, you know, if you're I want to live solar. Okay. Like, dude, fucking go train. Oh, the gym's closed.
Yeah. Gym's
been closed for 8 months. So make a fucking move then.
Yeah. Yeah. And I sympathize with it to a certain extent, because there's obviously, I've been a guy who made $12 an hour. Yeah, so, you know, like, that's hard. You know, it's hard to figure out when you're doing that at that point. But, you know, like, I was lucky enough when this happened to be in a better position. So I was like, fuck this. I'm selling my house and I'm not living like this for as long. I'm going to the freest place I can find where it's going to be free for as long as possible. And, you know, whatever's going to come is going to come, but I'm going to go to the best place. And there's a certain amount of dudes that were, you know, almost saying that was cowardly. Like, you should stay and fight. And, man, even the Vikings left, you know, like the Vikings left. They left Sweden. That's why, you know, they were going somewhere else because it was bullshit. You know, like they're, you know, and yeah, you read about the Scythians and all these tribal migrations and stuff. People migrate because things get shitty where they are, so they go somewhere else because they want to have an opportunity. They only have one life, so go do it. You know, like, you know, there's certain places where, yeah, it'd be cool to, you know, help the cause of freedom, but at the same time, you got to like recognize lost territory, and you know, if you're gonna be strong, you're gonna make money, and you're gonna do all these things, you need to be in a place where you can do that. You know, and so you know, you aren't much good to people if you're like a piece of shit. You know.
Yeah, like I got told that a lot. Like the past year, I was in Thailand, and people tell me, "You're a pussy. If you really were a fighter, you'd come back and you'd fight." I'm like,
yeah.
There's this sentiment of like of LARPing online, and I know people want like a civil war where we can literally line up and we can go shoot somebody, and then now like, oh, we beat the bad people, and now we're going to have the free world that we all want.
Right.
The reality, if you live in a modern Western society, which everybody does, you live in the United States, you live in the UK or France or Germany, you have a massive bureaucrat government. So that's one thing. You have the state. You have the state. You also have a huge social structure because we all live in a functional society. The water's still running. There's still electricity. This isn't Kosovo. It's not, you know, Serbia versus Bosnia in the 1990s. Like, so you don't really want a war. You just want sort of this made up opportunity where we can go punch somebody in the face and think like, you know, I won, I plant my flag on the hill. Historically speaking, as you said, when things get bad in an area, whether it's because of weather, because of the government, because of warring tribes, you could stay and die, or you could stay and become enslaved, which is what I think a lot of people are going to have to face up to sort of like, do I want to continue living in this place that is not good for my health because of all these restrictions and all these things that become, you know, very authoritarian, or you can move to somewhere where there's more freedom. Yeah, the whole concept of the fucking United States is what was it? Religious freedom. You know what? We're living in England. Our religion, our beliefs, you know, our view of the world, you know, our ability to worship, that's being oppressed. We could stay and fight the English government, which back in those days would kill you.
Yeah.
This is a very different time period. Or we could go to some place where we're going to have personal freedom to worship and believe as we want.
Yeah,
that's what the U.S. was. That's why do people come to the United States? My country sucks, and I can't make any money. I'm going to fight the fucking government. Oh wait, the government's run by the military, and they'll shoot me. Yeah. Or I could go move somewhere else where I'm still from my country, but you know what? Now I can make money, and I'm not at risk of being put into a prison and put through rendition, and my body gets thrown to a ditch. Yeah, I view this very pragmatically. Yeah. You know, and even the concept of fighting, like I told my guys again, like in my inner group, this, like, if you want to change the world, you need to be alive to do that. And if you're truly committed to battling the powers that be, so to speak, then you're looking at a long march through multiple social cycles, through multiple elections, through, okay, I hope that I can actually be enough of an example, have my own polarity, create a tribe of men, I can send them out into the world. They can do good. They can create their own tribes. We can create this network. And hopefully over multiple years, probably, looking at 10, 20 years, maybe the culture can positively change for the better and direction I want that creates the world that I want to live in. That's how that actually works.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not going to talk shit on the people that went to the Capitol since they believed in themselves, but
sure.
You go to the Capitol. Hey, we're going to go inside the Capitol building. Oh, fuck. Now we just committed federal crimes. Like that. Again, I'm sure you had fucking 100% faith in that decision. That was a very stupid tactical decision. You have taken, this is a very like American Christianity thing I've realized traveling, where Americans tend to this because of, almost like religious fundamentalism and like the watered down version of worshiping God that we have. We like to ascribe to this sort of like apocalyptic end game worldview, where you're like, there's going to be a second coming, there's going to be an apocalypse, there's going to be a revelation, and there's going to be the final battle that ends all the battles, and maybe this is the final battle. And then if we can just win, win this one thing on this one day, then heaven comes and everything's fixed, and we got our savior. And like, I take a very long view of history. And I'm not an atheist, but I'm not of believing that way. I take a very long view of history. Right. Change takes time. The universe that you want to bring into being takes time to create. God took 7 days to create the universe. You're not doing it in one day.
Right.
So are you God? No, you're not God. Do you expect to accomplish this in 7 days or 7 weeks or 7 months? You're probably looking at 70 years. You're looking at a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do think there's a possibility of conflict that, could
conflict 100%.
create some change. I mean, what I've encouraged, because, I'm in a place as you are that like people might listen to me, so I have to be very careful what I'm going to say, and man, I think a lot of it is just dudes have been asleep at the wheel they weren't even at the wheel. They let their women and like shitty dudes drive the cars. And we got what we deserved for that to a certain extent. You can't let all the best men just sit at home and be like, I'm just going to worry about my business, so I'm going to worry about that. It's like, if you're going to, if you want to make change in society and make sure the place around you is run well, you probably need to run for office yourself. You and there's a lot of dudes who are like, we have 20 years worth of veterans who of a lot of them are really decent guys. And now's the time where a lot of those guys maybe need to step up and like start that long cycle of change, and be involved in things. Because if you just let everyone else do it, I mean, what do you expect to happen? You let the worst people run it. I mean, I would do it, except for I'm completely unelectable because I'm a weirdo. But and also I hate paperwork. I can't even imagine being an administrator. But it's still, I mean, there are a lot of guys who do have those skills and do have the family and all the pieces of the puzzle that you would need to make that happen. And I think that now it's the time in the places where it's not lost territory to maybe for them to like actually start taking an active role. But yeah, it's not like you said, this LARPy thing where like they're going to have the big moment and then it's going to be okay. If anything, I mean, I've thought about it, like, what if the states were actually to secede or whatever, like certain states, like, can you imagine the infrastructure conversation that has to happen?
That's a serious question though. Like, okay, how do we have power now?
Yeah, well, I mean, California's water comes from like Colorado or something like that, or something, I mean, there's all kinds of different things that need to get untangled, which, not to say this happens all the time in the world. I mean, it can happen, but that's a very grown-up conversation that needs to take place. And it's not a lot of like, we should do this. And it's a lot of, like, okay, well, does Apple stop serving us? Like, do our computers go down because Apple's in California? Like, who knows?
Does our Wi-Fi get shut off? Does Verizon say, okay, we're not going to, let's just say hypothetically, California seceded. Good, I'd be so happy. But California secedes. All right, well, there's no more internet in California now. Verizon just canceled everything. They shut down the towers.
Yeah, there's a lot of big boy fucking decisions that need to happen and discussions that need to take place that aren't just like, we're going to fight. So people need to be a little realistic, I think, about what's involved. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't do it. It just means that, like, okay, well, let's have a serious discussion about what that looks like. not like this, like just we're going to go out with signs and dress up in costumes. Cause that's not gonna work. That's not how it gets done. So cool. Man.
It's very, what's the term? The performative, it's the performative protest, performative
street theater. Yeah.
I'm going to change the world. Yeah, exactly. Street theater.
Yeah. And I definitely discourage people from getting involved in that, because it's just a good way to go to jail for nothing, like to put on a show, but as much as I do admire some of the guys who are doing it, because I guess someone has to do it, but like, I don't want to, I wouldn't send guys in that particular direction. Unless their neighborhoods are getting attacked and their families are getting killed and all kinds of stuff like that, maybe it's time, but it's not what I don't think that's the best route to anywhere.
I respect the conviction, but like same thing. I've been very careful what I tell guys, and that's one thing I'm definitely not encouraging. And there's always that male fantasy, like what if we put together like a, like the mercenary army, something that goes and fights. I don't know, the U.S. government. I'm like, you guys know, Ruby Ridge, 1990s, like, or even Waco, Texas. I'm like, I don't think going to war with the U.S. government is a good idea. But I realize it's this detachment from reality where, how to say, like, because so much of life is lived online and men are very atomized.
Right.
Maybe they get woken up and they realize like their life has lacked agency, and then they want to sort of attach themselves to a cause. Yeah, and those kinds of like, fight the power, like, end of the world narrative is like, it's very appealing. Mentally, you just it gets inserted into your firmware. It's like, oh yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, and the other side's doing the same thing. I mean, because obviously, sure, there's a lot of little blue-haired girls and whatever on the left and so forth, but obviously, man, there's something that gets tapped into. It's like, if you're a dude and you're on the fence, you get to go be violent and feel like a hero. You get to go burn shit down and beat people up and feel like a hero. I mean, it's just whatever side's winning. That's like, it makes you feel like a hero or not. I mean, so it attracts dudes for the same reasons, the left, there's probably a lot of guys there who are literally just there for the violence, and that's been my experience with watching some of those groups in real life, here's the lady with the megaphone, and that's one part of this group, and here's this kind of sketchy dude over here who just kind of came to fuck some people up.
I mean, in all honesty, if I was of a different mind, and I was younger, and I'm not really like, I'm not endorsing Antifa at all, but let's just say you're one of those. Let's just say you're a broke guy and you're left leaning. It's like, shit, I can go fucking loot Apple and like go throw a fucking Molotov cocktail through the Chase window of the Chase Bank where they withdrew my account, overdrew it. Fuck yeah, let's go fucking burn the bank down. Let's start.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, and there are no consequences for doing that.
We're not getting arrested.
Yeah, cool. Exactly. Cool. Like, oh well, and I don't think people really realize that there's that aspect to it. A lot of people just overlook that, but that's totally happening. Like that. 100%. There's tons of guys who are doing that, who are like, fuck yeah. The fuck you teacher at school who gave me a D, there's a lot of, resentment obviously that's involved in a lot of that, but anyway, man, I think I'll probably wrap this up because we've been talking for a while, but this is a lot of really interesting stuff. I think it's a good start to the world season. Is there anything that you have coming up that you want to promote or anything?
No, I'll be in Florida, from February onwards. If there's any guys that are in Florida, that I'll be probably in the West Palm Beach area. If anyone wants to come through, I'll probably have a meetup at some point there. But aside from that, like, obviously, I'm supposed to be a fitness guy, on some level. So if anyone is in need of training solutions for fat loss, muscle gain, generally unfucking yourself and finally taking your health seriously and looking like, a man,
right?
I probably have an answer for you.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again for coming on the show.
No problem, Jack. Good stuff.
All right.
Adios.